Hi, welcome to the bathtub. It's the old masturbator and the old masturbator's new hat. My wife got me from somewhere, I forget. And probably TK Maxx or TJ Maxx. And I'm wearing it because it's the fifth time I've tried to film this. And Dodo only jumps on my head constantly when she hears the beeping from the camera. But she's not going to do it now, right? Look, she doesn't even want to see this hat. You don't even want to look at this hat, do you? Huh? Huh? Okay. Anyway, let's see if we can get off without it. We're going to talk about my old friend Tom Disch, as I've said now for the sixth time. And Tom Disch was a good friend, one of my favorite writers when I was a kid. He's still one of my favorite writers, and he's also one of my few role models as a writer. I mean, Tom Disch. If you enjoyed Tom Disch's work, whether he was writing his poetry or his essays, or his science fiction, or his kind of horror, weird horror novels as he got older, or his poetry. And here's kind of an important book. This is published by the University of Press of New England. It's called A Child's Garden of Grammar. They're poems about grammar, like homonyms and object of the preposition and so forth like that. And if you learn anything from Tom, it's to do what you enjoy. Tom liked writing about grammar. He really liked grammar. He has a kind of a mind for puzzles and word puzzles. And that'll fit right into what we're talking about today. This is his book of essays, The Castle of Indolence. We've talked about Tom in the past. This is a slightly rarish book of his. This is the British edition of Getting Into Death. These are great titles. Getting Into Death. That's the title of the story, of the central story in the book. One of my favorite of his late weird horror novels is The Sub, A Study in Witchcraft, and The Substitute Teacher, right? The substitute teacher was always kind of the bane of your existence when you were a kid, unless they were pushovers and they would let you do anything. But the subs are always a little scary sometimes. And it's a horror novel about a substitute teacher. This is his Dark Verses and Light. He published his poetry as Tom Disch. He published his fiction as Thomas M. Disch. Okay, so everything's settled down. Dodo's finally settled down. And we're going to talk about a novel of his. It's a lost novel of Tom Disch. It's lost in plain sight, which I had no idea this book had been published until a few weeks ago. Somebody I know on Facebook named Daryl Schweitzer, a good novelist, short story writer, and critic, and I guess an all-around literary raconteur or whatever the hell he is. Anyway, he had a post that came on my feed about Tom Disch's novel, The Troll of Sherwood Forest. Make sure I've got that title right, because there's reading great books in the bathtub is nothing if it's not completely inaccurate about facts. We're just constantly getting things wrong. It's called A Troll of Sherwood Forest, as in Sherwood like to go to Sherwood Forest. It's a pun or a homonym. I don't know what the hell it is. It's something. And there goes Dodo again. Okay, we're going to get the hat out again. Do you want the hat? Do we need to do the hat? Put it on my shoulder. Anyway, what I learned from Daryl Schweitzer in this Facebook postage was this novel, which I knew about, because when I knew Tom, he was talking about it quite a bit in the early 90s. And he was talking about how much he enjoyed writing it. He was having a great time writing it. Now, as I recall, Tom never sold a novel unless he had sold it, had a contract by a publisher, and they paid him to write the novel. He's the only good writer I can think of who would sell novels with an outline, chapter and outline. Most writers who I like, and I myself, don't like chapter and outlines because you like to find the book as you go along. And Tom was the opposite of that. He really liked to kind of puzzle out the book and then fill in the puzzle he had set out for himself. Anyway, this novel of his, I remember him telling me about it and how much he enjoyed it, and he was having trouble finding a publisher for it. And I had no idea that he had ever published it. I had heard different people telling me they had read it, and it was a very weird book for Tom, and it is a very weird book for Tom. But anyway, what I never knew was that it was serialized in a magazine called Amazing Stories. I think Amazing Stories is the oldest science fiction. I think it's Hugo Gernsback started this back in when God was a pup, at the beginning of time. And this was the 1992 I guess the editor's name was Kim Mohan. I knew nothing about this magazine. I didn't even know it existed in this format, this kind of large size format. And that cover has nothing to do, I don't think, with Tom's novel. But what was interesting about this three issue serial novel, so it's published in 3 parts, is that they gave a whole lot of attention to Tom in 1992, which they should have, because he had published a lot of good stories and amazing way back in the 60s. Stories like Descending, one of the great horror stories, a very funny horror story about a guy who gets caught on an endless escalator in some department store that never stops. And they published the whole 3 sections of this really weird, odd, strange, sui generis. It's not, you can't categorize this novel in any possible way, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a completely odd novel. I would recommend, if you like Tom Disch, you should try to find these 3 volumes. It's October, I believe November and December. Anyways, it's number 7, 8, and 9 from 1992, and there's the 3 magazines. Anyway, as soon as I heard that this novel existed in print, I knew Tom had written it. I knew he'd had trouble selling it or finding a publisher for it, but I did not know it had been serialized and was available. And you can get it I think I got all 3 of these for $18 or $19 on eBay. And I read them almost instantly. And it's a very weird, fun, odd, unusual book. I'm going to read. It's sort of a gimmick. It has a gimmick or a setup that's a little bit like A Child's Garden of Grammar, where he wanted to write little poems about different grammatical aspects of grammar. This one presents itself as an adult children's book about how to read. Basically, the central joke is that we live in a world where nobody can read anything, and this book is going to help people learn how to read. It's not going to do that, but it's sort of the gimmick of the book. It starts off with this dedication, which I do. I like Tom's poetry in his verse. This novel is dedicated to the reading impaired in the hope that it will bring them many hours of pleasure and instruction as they begin their first journey on the reading railroad. Toot, toot, all aboard for Sherwood Forest. I don't know if that's a poem, but it's a dedication. And the idea that you're going to learn how to read on it and that you live in this world in New York, it's a future New York where nobody can read, especially the central character. And he lives in a world which is filled with, there's 4 categories of people in this world, and one of them is the dorks. The dorks are basically your average person, right, in New York at that time. People who like to go to sports events. Where do they go to? They go to sports events to see sporting events between the superstars and the favorites. You know, the stupidity of going to sports. And at one point, there's a conga line of them going past the beginning of this book, and they're singing the Song of the Dorks. I kind of can't resist reading this for you. Ho, ho, huff, huff, we're 7 heavy dorks. And when we're feeling gruff, we pop some corks and show our stuff to dorks who ain't as tough. Tra-la, tra-lee, we rather like to lark. So when we're on a spree, we buy some buds and bake some spuds and revel after dark. So that's Tom's picture of the dorks who pretty much populate New York and the world all throughout time. So the summary, a quick summary of this book, is it's about a guy named Joe Doe who works for a horrible place called Pizza Bill's, and it's in the future. I forget, hundreds of years in the future. And one day he's bored. He decides to go down to this place called Sherwood Forest, which is, I guess it's downtown somewhere. I can't remember now if it's supposed to be Central Park or if it's downtown. Anyway, he goes to this park, which is basically a sort of computer-generated fantasy world like Disneyland. And then he goes there like this. He goes into it, and when he first gets there, some sort of magical owl comes down, and he has to pay his credit card. He uses his credit card and sticks it in a tree. I think he sticks it in a tree, and everything, of course, is the future. So like a bag of potato chips costs like $830,000 and stuff like that. And when he goes in, the owl says, "Well, you can't go through Sherwood Forest unless you know how to read." The whole book is kind of a game on learning how to read. I know it sounds weird, but it works. And as he goes into it, he sees this sign. And on this sign, there's the 4 different types of people who live in the Sherwood Forest. One's the dorks, one's the trolls, one's the elves, and one's the fairies. Those are the 4 types of creatures in this fantasy world. That's kind of obviously a computer generated. Everyone has an avatar. It is ahead of its time in creating this kind of comical landscape that's a computer generated virtual reality. As John Doe goes into this world, he sees a sign, trolls, elves, and so forth. And in the first page or 2, he teaches himself to read from those 4 words. I won't tell you any more than that because it's just playing with the physicality and the pleasures of words and language and letters, which Tom does in all his stuff somewhere. He goes into this world. He meets different fairies. He meets a kind of ugly fairy named Cough Drop, who has a lisp. Cough drop is if you have a cough drop in your mouth. And he meets a bunch of crazy bikers. He goes through a whole series of adventures throughout the course of which he's learning to read and so forth. And eventually, it's kind of episodic in that way. So it sort of goes through a series of different adventures and who he's going to meet. He meets this beautiful girl he's going to fall in love with and so forth. And finally, at the end, he finds his way out of the simulacrum, the simulation, which is probably into another simulation of what's the real New York, which is basically its own simulation, probably. And when he comes out of it, he finds out all the bikers and the horror people the guys who are the tough guy bikers are people there on an NEA grant. They're people with National Endowment for the Arts grants to go into this simulation. Everything that Tom can make fun of, that he normally likes to make fun of, such as National Endowment for the Arts grants, which he always thought was given to the worst possible artists. There's those types of jokes in it, but it doesn't. It's not just. He's not I don't think of Tom as a satirist. He really tells stories, and it is basically a children's story for adults, with, it's a little more ribald and a little more upset. What's the word? It's politically incorrect in every possible way, as Tom would want to be. Anyway, it's 3 volumes. This is a really cool set. So I really recommend, if you like Tom Disch, to get these 3. Look through back orders or look through eBay. Again, I found the 3 of these for maybe $19, and they're all in really nice shape. These 3 volumes also contain something that's really cool, which I did not even know existed till I got these. So I'm very thankful to Daryl Schweitzer for telling me. And that is a 2-part essay called My Life as a Child by Tom Disch. And it is basically his growing up and what he did in the Midwest. He was from Minnesota, wasn't it? He was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and he grew up in I thought he grew up in Minnesota, but I can't remember now. And his family, a very Catholic family. He hates the Catholic Church, Tom Disch. But he grew up in a Catholic family. And it tells about how he grew up and all the sort of stuff, the adventures that we all have, who are kind of book nerds, and how he got absorbed by books and they gave him pleasures, and how he got involved in writing, and how he moved to New York. And one of the things that it talks about, which I don't think I knew, is that he took ballet when he was a little kid. He really always loved ballet. I think I vaguely remember him talking about this. But Tom was a man of many, many passions and many interests. And they all kind of come out in this a word I don't like to use, wacky, children's book for adults, which is very different from all of the rest of Tom's books. And one of the things he says in the course of this essay is that, he loves writing and so forth, but he really enjoyed writing The Troll of Sherwood Forest more than almost anything he'd written. And it does bring out that playfulness and the silliness of Tom's sense of humor, and it's very intelligent silliness that I have always admired and enjoyed. So anyway, I'm really glad I have this novel now. It's not available in a proper book format. I don't think it's on I haven't looked to see if there's an e version of this book. It should be out there. But if you love Tom Disch as much as I do, then you might want to look at that 3-volume, the 3 issues serialization of The Troll of Sherwood Forest by the late, great Thomas M. Disch. Okay. Dodo, you can come down now. Come. You want to come? Come on. Come on. No, now you don't want to come. Okay, that's fine.